So welcome. We are here with Ashley King today. Ashley is a multiple-time finisher of the Queen City Marathon. She's been a PACE member with our race and an avid member of our running community in Regina and a new mom. So congratulations, Ashley, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be on here today. I've been really watching all of the other interviews, and I'm happy that you guys asked me to tell you about my running experience. As you mentioned, you said that I am a new mom, so I have been watching a lot of the racers, everything going on in the last few months. I haven't been able to necessarily participate myself, but that doesn't stop my run or walk journey. It's just changing it up differently from where it was beforehand.
Yeah, definitely. So let's expand on that a little bit and just kind of tell us about your running journey, how you got started, what you've been doing for the last few years, and kind of what it looks like now.
Yeah, so my running journey has really been lifelong. I got started in cross country. I think at the time there was, it was like school cross country, but I think the youngest grade that could participate was grade 5. I had a vice principal who was leading the cross country team. He saw me in grade 3 and he saw some potential in me and one other guy. So he got us on the team unofficially. We weren't allowed to compete for the first 2 years, but we were out there training with all the other older kids and just running around small town Pilot Butte. When I grew up there, it was still quite a ways from the city. Now it's pretty much part of the city, but I still lived out of town, just running. The town of Pilot Butte at the time, all the way around was 5 kilometers. So we would do that quite a bit if you wanted anything more. And then anybody that knows that hill that goes up and down, that's how I learned how to hill train, was going up and down that big Pilot Butte hill. So that's where I began. I went through school, high school, and had lots of success with that. And then I was on the Cougars track and field and cross country team for 1 year. Now, unfortunately, during that year, I experienced horrible knee injuries, and I was curling competitively as well as running competitively. So I actually took a step away from running for 2 solid years. In those 2 years, I maybe ran 5 times. For somebody that has ran my entire life, that was quite a huge thing. I got told by some doctors that I would never run again because my knees were so bad. And I worked with a physiotherapist to rebuild strength, not only in my knees, but in my hips. So it was really eye-opening, and at such a young age, just having that block that I never could possibly run again. So going into 2014, like January, I wanted to attempt to run again. I had rehabilitated after being off running for 2 years. And I looked at my family members and I said, I'm going to run a full marathon. Now, this is somebody that's maybe around like 12 kilometers max at that time. So they looked at me and they're like, okay, but you haven't ran in 2 years. And with your history, are you sure like just jumping into a full is a big thing? I said, yep, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go do the Queen City Marathon in September. I'll give myself a lot of time to train. So I signed up for the running room clinic that started in May for the full marathon, and everyone looked at me funny when they're like, oh yeah, I've run this many half marathons and now I'm attempting a full, and I've run this many half marathons and now it's a full. And they looked at me and they're like, how many half marathons have you run? I go, none. I'm going to run the full. They kind of looked at me like, are you sure? Yep, that's what I want to do. And after like the first weekend, they're like, okay, I think she's got this if she sticks to the training. And then ran the Queen City Marathon in 2014. It was supposed to be a one and done thing. Like, that's all I was going to do. I was wanting to run one marathon in my life, and I got hooked on the community, the social aspect, I met so many great people while training throughout the summertime. And I signed up for another shortly after. Signed up for the Manitoba Marathon. And I would say where I got really hooked was the following year, QCM. It was right before. I think it was 3 days before the Queen City Marathon. They were still looking for pacers, and I wasn't signed up, but I was just like, you know what? I gotta have a solid base of training. I'm gonna pace this race. And so every year after, Queen City Marathon has been the race that I don't run it for myself. I run it for the other runners that are there. It's kind of like my community race where I give back.
Oh, that's super cool. I mean, and I think that idea that running was something you were going to do or come back to as a kind of a one-off, but it was the community that kept you there and keeps you there now is a common experience for a lot of people. It's kind of an entry level. Now, they don't all start at the full, obviously. Lots will start at the 5, which is completely great. But it is.
I don't recommend.
No, definitely it's definitely a harder start for sure for most people. But having your competitive background, obviously, that was something that helped you get kind of to that level very quickly. So that's a very cool thing to hear. In terms of the running that you've done so far, what are some of the things you look back at and are most proud of? I mean, obviously, the first one's got to be fairly high on that list. But are there other achievements that you've made through the running that you want to highlight?
In 2016, I decided that I wanted to be a little bit more serious, try and get a little faster and qualify for Boston. So I ran a ton of races in 2016, and I had it all thoroughly planned out. I'm a very type A person, so you asked me in November of the year before what races I'm running, and I have it all planned out all the way through, and training schedules done up for myself. So that's kind of what my 2016 looked like. And I ended up, I just nearly missed my qualifying time in Saskatoon in May of that year. And I ended up qualifying at the Edmonton Marathon in 2016, which allowed me to run the 2017 Boston Marathon. And after that, I wanted to try and hit up all the majors. So just recently ran Chicago. And I would say like that was a huge highlight for me. I went in there, the initial goal at the start of the year was to run Chicago and try and hit the fastest time that I've ever hit before. It's a fall race, it's a pretty flat course, so it makes sense that you could hit the fast time. I found out just after the Queen City Marathon last year that I was pregnant. So all of my goals and plans changed, and I really appreciated the Chicago Marathon that much more because I was able to complete it while I was 8 weeks pregnant. And at the time, I was so very sick. I was barely getting any nutrition into my body and keeping it in my body because I had horrible all-day sickness. So there was a moment in that race where I pulled over to the aid course and I just needed food because my body was lacking nutrition at that point. And they didn't have food, but they had donut holes for the volunteers. So I had some Dunkin' Donuts donut holes, and there's just a whole different type of running when you're running while pregnant. And it's been such a cool experience. I not only got to finish that race, but I got to finish 2 other half marathons during my pregnancy. My last one being in February, it was a hypothermic half marathon in Winnipeg. And that was a cool experience because I'm 30 weeks pregnant, or almost 30 weeks. I don't know exactly how pregnant I was then, but I finished it, and I finished it in a pretty good time. I felt great. And I just ran based on field, not pace. I kind of threw pace out the window for someone that likes to run fast and is pretty obsessed with pace. It's really opened my eyes to a whole different type of training that I could do for me and my body. It's more intuitive than anything else.
Very cool. I love the story there of the Chicago Marathon with the donuts. And there's really reminds me that how amazing the volunteers on a marathon course are, that they're willing to share what is theirs with those runners out there, and really to make sure and have such a positive attitude to keep everybody moving on that course. So it's a cool story to hear when you talk about that. Or yeah, really reminds me, it makes me miss our volunteers this year as part of our event.
Yeah, oh, I miss being there, volunteering, being a part of everything, but the online community has been just as amazing.
And you are a big part of that volunteer side as well. So I mean, not only have you paced for the last number of years, but it's a couple of years now you've joined the organizing committee. So you are a part of that setup crew that gets it going cool too. And so I really
Yes.
appreciate that part of it. You kind of play both roles, the race day as well as the prep. So that's a huge behind the scenes piece that not everybody always recognizes or knows who the faces are who put that on for them.
Yeah, I try and stay as involved in the running community as possible. If I'm not running a race, I'm trying to volunteer or be around and supportive in any way possible.
Speaking of that community, tell us a little bit about your running community, who you run with, who's kind of you train with. What does that look for like you in terms of the people supporting you on your journey?
My running community over the years has varied just with the nature of my jobs. At one point, I was working 3 jobs and I was getting about 2 hours of sleep every night. So my running community more saw me virtually before virtual was the thing, because I would run whenever I could fit it in. Maybe it was a lunch hour. But I first of all started with the running room. So they have a near and dear place in my heart. I have gone back multiple times to teach courses and teach other people at the running room. It was 3 years ago now. So in 2017, I had a really big group of full marathoners. So it was kind of like passing on that torch of these people were now all going to run their first full marathon, and there was about 12 of them. So that was really awesome. And I've stayed friends with them throughout the years. So lots of those people now will go off together and run. And a good chunk of us are going to be walking the full marathon this upcoming weekend. So we're excited for that. And we're looking forward to walking around the city. We're using our houses as aid stations. So we're going to go from one person's house to the next person's house to the next person's house. And hopefully we'll get that full 42.2 kilometers in. Marathon Matters has been a huge community for me as well too. The year that I decided to become a little bit more serious, add on more mileage, they were so supportive and we'd go up to races together, Saskatoon being one that was in my mind, where there was a huge community from Marathon Matters that helped come cheer me on. And then most recently, the park run crew has been amazing, just going out on the Saturdays and doing that 5 kilometers, especially when I wasn't running a whole lot. And sometimes the 5 kilometers was all I did in a week. That was my Saturday run, and that might have been the only run that I got in during the week, especially during my pregnancy. So I really missed that when everything got shut down, because it was harder to go out and do that 5 kilometers by myself as I got further and further into my pregnancy.
Oh, I definitely am with you on missing the park run. It's an interesting community that's evolved over the last 2 years, and when we get to come back, it's going to be fantastic. That's going to be one that really, I think, revitalizes the running community and gets us all together. And I would be shocked if we don't have a few Saturday mornings where there's 200 or 300 runners out there. Obviously, once we're back to a little bit of what we typically would expect, because nowadays that would be a little scary.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap up with advice. What advice might you have for either new runners or even those like yourself who have been doing it for a number of years? When you think about what you want to pass on, what's kind of Ashley's best advice?
For new runners, I would always say don't set your expectations too high. I oftentimes will get new runners coming to me for advice, information, setting up programs, and their number one thing is, I want to be fast. And fast comes over time. I think what is more important is just getting that mileage in getting it down on the pavement in whatever way you can. If that means that you take so many walk breaks, so you take so many walk breaks to get to that mileage. Anybody's a runner, even if they take that walk. And that's a profound thing to some people, because when you're running in school, running is running. You're not supposed to stop. Is somewhat what's drilled into your head when you're doing those competitive school-like races. But it can be seen in so many different ways. And I think that's something that is good for new runners to hold on to, is that you can work up to that continuous run if you want to run that continuous run. Some people never do. Some people will still run that full marathon and take their walk breaks that they need because they know that that's what's going to get them through the full marathon. So that's my advice for the new runners. Advice for runners that are doing it maybe a little bit more competitive. Something that I've really honed into in the last year is that whatever takes you back or your setback, don't always see it as a setback, but see it as a new way to grow. So maybe it's an injury, maybe it's, for me, I wouldn't call my pregnancy a setback, but I think it has allowed me to grow so much more as a runner, where now I'm coming back on much more slower than I would have thought I would have come back on. I've only really run once since I had my baby, and I had him in May. So that was about 16, 17 weeks ago. But I just don't feel like my body is 100% ready to go all out. I'm focusing on some physio areas first before I go into running. And I'm going to come back stronger because I'm gradually taking my time for that ramp up. One of my big goals going into next year is to get back to run the full distance by May. If I get there, I get there. If I don't, that's okay. I need a little bit more time. And I'm allowing a lot more grace with myself as I get further into my running journey, versus just being so hard on myself, because running is meant to be enjoyed, not just to happen. And the enjoyment of sometimes hitting the pavement and the fresh air is so much more than a time or a finish.
I think that's some great advice for both new and seasoned runners alike. So we'll leave it there today. Thank you very much, Ashley, and congratulations again on the little guy. Creating a next generation of runners for Regina for sure. So thank you very much for your time today, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks so much. You have a good day.